Coming up on today's episode.
But I remember on that was the first ever job. They were getting, skinhead, skin on the floor, have a beer and, there was all this sort of and they used to say things like, oh, is going for auditions, and they would give you a script, and they say, oh, can you read okay? This was where we sort of came from, and the, reggae and this sort of mixture and blending of our sort of cultures was just normal to us. And so when two-tone happened, that really struck us, because it was like all of a sudden it was the kids that don't get on top of the pops or on top of the pops.
Chatting Tracks, let's talk music.
Hi, it's Robbie, and welcome along to today's one. I've got a great one for you. I've got the fantastic Symond Lawes. He's a former builder, he's a former actor, and he's the arranger of the Great Skinhead Reunion, which happens in Brighton every single year. It's a fantastic weekend that brings ska, reggae, and skinhead music together for charity. It's a must if you love that sort of music. He's a great guy. We had an amazing chat, and we spoke about his brief building career and also the darker side of skinhead fandom. We had the Rock Against Racism movement, and we discussed why that happened. It was absolutely engaging, and I really enjoyed chatting to him. If you can, please like and subscribe to the channel, because it means a lot to me. And if you've already done it, thank you so much. You're amazing. There'll be a link in the description for everything we discuss, and I'll see you on the next one. Love and peace. When you were sort of growing up, was your house quite musical? Was there lots of music in your house?
Well, yeah. I come from a family of 5 kids. So my mum and dad were both, they're not musicians, but they were really into music. My mum was an original mod from the 50s. My dad was really big into jazz and that sort of stuff. So I grew up very much in, my older brother, he's 6 years older than me, was into Slade and Roxy music and all that type of stuff. My oldest sister was into 70s disco. And then she was into things like The Jam and Ian Dury and Elvis Costello, Wings, all that sort of stuff. And then when I came of age, it was punk. I was sort of 11, 12 when punk broke out in 76, 77. So that was my thing. And in Wickham, where I grew up, was very much a punk town, because we had a promoter there called Ron Watts, who lived in the town. And he was the guy that put on the very first punk festival at the 100 Club. So all those early punk bands he used to bring to Wickham. So there was a venue called the Nag's Head and the Town Hall. So all those early bands, the Jam, the Pistols, the Damned, you name them, they played there. So, iconic, but I was slightly sort of too young for it. And, but it was really exciting, going into town and seeing all the punks and it was just wow, So, so that sort of was my first real, you're coming of age, when you the music you like when you're 13 stays with you forever, doesn't it? So mine was punk, and then obviously two-tone came along slightly after that, a couple of years later, and that was my time. But yeah, musically, my grandfather was a pianist. He used to play on the West End stage. He was a fireman during the Second World War, so he used to entertain during the during the Blitz and all that. So yeah, it was very much music was very much part of my upbringing. Yeah, we'd fight over the stereo constantly, Yeah.
And when you won the fight, which record would be the one that you would put on? Which would be the record you had to play?
Well, I think when I was a kid, it would be my dad's sort of music, stuff like Fats Domino and Lonnie Donegan was one of my favourites, when I was young. Stuff like that. And then, and it's a real secret, like embarrassing, but I quite like my sister's disco stuff as well, Native New Yorker and Odyssey and them type of bands I really liked, And then I really loved Mud. Remember the band Mud?
Yeah.
Before punk, like that rock and roll sort of thing. I loved that. I liked all sorts of stuff. Simon and Garfunkel, I really liked, and I've got a very eclectic taste in music. Although I became a skinhead very early on, people think but actually no, I like everything. Yeah.
Well, even Sid Vicious liked ABBA, so you can.
Well, there you go. My first girlfriend, Nicola Hill, used to take me dancing to ABBA. Yeah.
Fantastic. So was it right you were a child model as well? You did a lot of modelling when you were young.
I basically, funnily enough, I've got somebody, I don't know who, but somebody made a Wikipedia of me. And they put it on there like child model and all that. But no, I actually, I started acting when I was about 18, 19. And the reason I did it was I was really into it at school. But I was a real bad boy sort of thing. I was constantly standing outside the headmaster's office and just refused to do anything. But I was always in a top class. But probably now I'd probably have some sort of statement as to what was wrong with me, like ADHD or some bollocks, But then I was just a bad kid who got caned a lot, But yeah, but I loved the sort of school plays, and I loved the acting. And the teacher, the acting teacher, drama teacher, Miss McWilliams, she was like one of the only teachers that really sort of I bonded with. She really encouraged me, and I really liked that. And I was quite good at it. So yeah, so I was into that. So anyway, when I left school, I basically left with no qualifications around. I went to a really bad school. It was one of the worst. I think it was the worst school in the county. I grew up in a town called High Wycombe, and it was like the real dumping ground for all the big council estates. So it was one of those sort of schools that you literally, if you survived the day, that was good enough, And yeah, and then basically I started working as a builder, as like building labourer, learning bricklaying and all that. And this one day we were working on a house, and the guy that owned the house was a photographer's agent, and we got talking one day, and it was a shitty, horrible winter's day, And he said, "Oh, what would you really like to do?" And I said, "Oh, I'd love to be an actor, So I've always." And he said, "Oh, I know a guy's got an agency. He'd really like you." And it was called Bother Boots, and they were in East London. And I didn't really take it too seriously. But my mate who I was working with at the time, his little brother was big into acting. He was always like dressing up and playing roles and all that. So my mate and his little brother went down there, and the agent took him on. Right. And they got like the Godly and Cream video the next week, the one with all the faces changing, which became
really
iconic video. They got that like straight away. And so anyway, fuck this, I want some of that. So the next week I went down there, joined, and then a week or so later I then got a video, and it was a thing called Anne Pig Owl. She was a French singer. And the producer was the record producer was a guy called Trevor Horn, who did a lot of the Frankie Goes to Hollywood and all that sort of stuff at the time. And my first job I got was working at Raymond's Review Bar in Soho, watching all these beautiful girls dancing and taking their clothes off, and getting paid 50 quid and pizzas and beer, which was a week on a building site. And I thought, this is for me. This is definitely for me. So for the next however many years, 20 odd years, I did a lot of acting work, and then basically a lot of character modelling, character acting. So I wasn't Mr. Like walking down catwalks and that. If I'd play like the builder, the van driver, all that type of stuff. When it came to the modelling, I mean, sometimes it was something a little bit nicer, but it was never really a fashion and Mr. Handsome and all that. It was just all like the normal bloke. And this is the sort of time when things like the Full Monty were being made and Lock, Stock and all them type of things. So whenever those things were made, I'd get a load of work because I was that type of character. So you go in and out of fashion. Like now, I think you'd need to be sort of gay and something or other to get a lot of work. Whereas then they like lads on council estates. So I was just very lucky. And then acting wise, I did loads of stuff. I mean, I did I remember doing Doctor Who, and it turned out to be the 25-year celebration of Doctor Who. So it became this iconic episode, which even now they're still selling CDs and DVDs of it and all that, And then I did loads and loads of things like EastEnders. I was in that a good few times, and The Bill, and a load of football hooligan films, The Firm, and all sorts of bits and bobs. It was mostly just sort of character acting, small parts. I remember one of my best things was a thing called Dear John, and the writer was the guy that wrote Only Fools and Horses, and I got a really good part in that. It was like the Christmas special. And I remember this one year, it was probably 86 or 7 or something, and I was on TV 3 times on Christmas Day in 3 different productions. And this is when there was only 3 or 4 channels, so you got to think every single person in the country knew my face. So although I wasn't like Michael Caine, everyone knew me, and in my local town, everyone knew what I was up to, and I never really took it seriously. To me, it was just better than work. It was like that or being on the building site, I'll do that. And that was really all I thought about it all, yeah. I just thought, I can't believe I'm getting away with this, I'm not getting away with this. And I get like a 3-month booking contract with the BBC, and we get like, whatever. I did Adrian Mole. Do you remember the Adrian Mole series? I played his mate. I played his mate when he joined the Baddie Boy gang. I was in that, and yeah, all sorts of bits and bobs. Yeah.
I mean, I love Dear John. I think it's a fantastic TV show.
Yeah, it was good, wasn't it? Yeah, it's one of my big regrets actually, and I always kick myself for this. Was there was a Christmas, like a viewing of it. And it was going out for the Christmas special. But I'm thinking about I'll tell you what, it was the night of the big storm. Do you remember when that, I don't know how old you are, but there was a big storm and it blew all the trees down. Right? It was that night. And we got up to BDC Centre to watch it, like as a live audience, to watch it on the screen because they wanted the laughter and all that. It was the first time I'd ever seen myself on screen, on this big screen. I thought, wow. And it was like the opening scene and I was Carol singing and it was quite a good part. Playing like a skinhead, me and a black bloke, like Muggergram type thing, And but anyway, there was a rap bar, an after show party thing, and we went to that. And John Sullivan, the writer, was there, and he came up to me and shook my hand and said, "Oh, you played that absolutely spot on, exactly what I saw in my mind. You done it bang on." And I was too shy to say, "Oh, give us a little part in Fools and Horses," even if it was just one line in Fools and Horses. That would have made my life because that is my favourite show ever. But I was too fucking shy, to sort of like, like flag. And like now I would give a fuck straight in there. But then I was also like, oh God, I just couldn't believe I was doing it. I'd never been at drama school. I had no sort of, my father was a sort of alcoholic, I had no formal education, no money behind me, no, the acting world then was very much middle class, or you had to grow up in Twickenham and go to RADA and places to get any decent work. Even the blokes you think were working like they weren't really, people like Gary Allman and that, they weren't really, they had money, and they went to drama schools, and there was like Anna Schurz was one, and few drama schools in all the kids that were in Grange Hill, they all went to I think it was Anna Schurz or one of those two. There was two East End sort of drama schools.
Italia Conti.
Out of Italia Conti, that's the other one.
Yeah,
they would all go there, and so they all had that, that bit of money and backing behind them. So they were getting the better parts. And I remember working on things, and we would have to teach these actors how to be like us. And you know what I mean? Like, why don't you just employ us to be like us? But he's our drama trained. So we go, no, you wear it like that, you say it like that. And, you know what I mean? But now looking back on it all, it's like I should have fucking pushed harder. But it is what it is. Yeah.
So were you typecast as a skinhead in all of these roles, pretty much?
Not always, but generally, yeah. I mean, I did do, generally, I suppose. Yeah, very rare. Because the thing is, they would sort of pretty much cast you for the character they knew. So they go, we need a tough guy, we need an armed robber, or I played a rapist a few times in Crime Watch, which is not particularly nice. I played all sorts of stuff, but yeah, generally it was pretty much me. They were the same sort of character, which I really wanted to do other stuff, but it was just like, well, I'm getting this work, and it's like Michael Caine or any of the, like Gary Allman and people. I mean, they make their name as a character. Tim Roth, Tim Roth made it made in Britain, and then he started doing things like, what was it? Not Logstock, but Pulp Fiction and things, because he's that same type of character. He played it very differently, but that's just, so you just naturally get typecasted because there's so many different people going for the roles. I mean, I did play like Harry Krishna once in something. But generally the same type of thing. Yeah.
When I was growing up, so I grew up in a place called Tilbury, and we obviously, one of the skinhead gangs that was known about was the Tilbury Skins. They were predominantly known for being violent and
I know them. Yeah.
Oh, you know them, yeah. I mean, I was too young to know them, but I knew of them, if you know what I mean.
Oh, everyone knew of them. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, they got in the paper, and it was like, "Look how violent we are, Mum," all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what I'm trying to sort of get to was it difficult sometimes with people being around you? Did they instantly think you were going to be a violent person or a nice person?
Yeah. Talk about a lot. I mean, it was very sort of. Yeah, I mean, it's very bigoted in a lot of ways because I remember, I remember, in fact, that job I was telling you about, that first job I ever got, there was this guy who was like the first assistant director. So we're like the skinhead, like hooligan mob. Basically, the story was this girl had come over from France, landed in London, walking down through Soho. She sees a gang of hooligans coming towards her. So she runs into this club to escape us, and we follow her in. Right. So as we go in, she comes on stage and we're all there drinking beer and all that. And she's doing her sexy stuff. And in the song, she calms us all down. By the end of it, we're all like in love and all calm and all that. That was a very tacky storyline. But I remember on that was the first ever job. They would get, hey, skinhead, skin on the floor, have a beer and, hey, there was all this sort of like and they used to say things like, oh, going for auditions, and they would like give you a script and they say, oh, can you read okay? And things like that. Do you know what I mean? They thought you were so fucking, from this different world that the media had projected, that we were all just thick, brain-dead idiots. The type of us that were doing acting work, of course we're not. Oh, yeah, we were tough guys and we would go in the pub and have fights and shit, but we were quite creative, artistic sort of lot, a lot of my mates, We just happened to be born in, like saying, you come from Tilbury, you just happen to be born in the wrong place where the opportunities are not there. It's not that you're stupid and thick, just you're not educated because you haven't been given that opportunity, it doesn't make you thick. And that took me a long time to realise that. That took me into my 20s before I realised that just because I've got no exam results doesn't necessarily mean I'm brain dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I've got nothing to prove it. But I started hanging around when I lived up Highgate with all these very wealthy sort of students and stuff, and they were all just thick as shit. But they were going to the top schools, but they were like so naive and so like, just unworldly. Whereas we had to live it and believe it and learn it all the way. Just a different thing. Yeah. So yeah, lots. And I'm going off on a tangent here, really. But yeah, we got lots of that. Yeah.
I just found it interesting that you get two sort of versions of skinheads. You get the people, like you say, that are creative, and then you get like, so many that you have to have the rock against racism movement.
Yeah.
That are just, and it's just a shame that when you get the wrong connotation take over.
Again, that was all manipulation by the press, because you got to think that, like with the skinhead thing, for instance, like I grew up in a very West Indian area. My next door neighbours, the two houses directly opposite me, were all West Indians. My as I looked out of my window, there was a telegraph pole, and all the West Indian kids used to play cricket against this. That was like the cricket stumps, this pole, and they'd all be playing. It was quite wide, our house was there, and there was like a bit of green between us and the opposite neighbours, so they would play there. So all my first day at secondary school, I went to school. I was the only white kid in our little group going to school, and we walked to the gate, and it was like the first day. So I was Mr. Leader, and they all got behind me. We sort of walked into school all terrified, but I had that balls to go forward, And even to this day, I managed Jamaican bands and things. But that element of it, and the skinhead culture, was created from that mixture of white British working class kids and black working class kids, because we all lived together. So we were all mates, Their parents, I remember the first West Indians coming in the mid-60s. I was born in 65, and I can remember Stephen, who lived next door, being a baby in a pram, because I got a throat germ from drinking his bottle. And I remember getting nearly killed me. I had to go to hospital, and my throat all swelled up. And I was 4 years old then, so that would have been about 69. So I remember all the West Indians, my dad going up in arms, the blacks are here and they're all going to kill us, all that. So this is where we sort of came from, and the, like reggae and this sort of mixture and blending of our sort of cultures was just normal to us. And so like when Two Tone happened, that really struck us, because it was like all of a sudden it was the kids that don't get on top of the pops or on top of the pops. Yeah, they were skinheads and black kids. These are people completely excluded. And all of a sudden Neville Staple and Terry Hall were us. And then Madness in London, although they were all white, but it didn't really matter to us, black and white. It was irrelevant. But the issue is that in British political history, as you well know, we had a Second World War. In the 1950s, there was a massive labour shortage because everyone had been killed and they wanted to rebuild London. So they invited all these West Indians into Britain to rebuild. 60s, they started selling off the empire. So there was a lot of money. There was a massive boom as everything was getting asset strips and sold. In the 70s, there was this massive recession. So out of that recession came the far right and the extremist groups that were sort of trying to sort of cash in on the misery. And the whole I've had this conversation quite a few times, but the whole idea of it, they were following Hitler's and Stalin's original sort of plans, and that was that you destroy, and out of the chaos rises a phoenix in a new power. And this is how the extremists are still doing it today. They create chaos, and out of chaos is a new power. Even the big company, America is still, they're flattening the Middle East because they want to have a new power. What they're doing in Palestine today is because they want a new power. It's the same thing. They just change it around. But what they did with us is they looked for chaos, and so they thought, who are the most violent, aggressive, chaotic people that will destroy and smash stuff up? Football hooligans and skinheads. These were the number two, the two top, violent hooligans, So it was like, great, and they'll follow you. You only got to get their leader, and the others will follow. And so the media then got something to write about. If you've got 2,000 people at a specials gig, all 15, 16-year-old kids all dancing about, getting a girl, listening to some music, buying a T-shirt and going home, what news is that? Get 10 of them Zeke Hyland in a fucking, working man's club in fucking Tilbury, then that's like world news. Do you know what I mean? And so it sells newspapers.
Yeah.
I always say it like this. If I went and saved 10 people's lives, right, I'd get 3 lines in a newspaper. If I went and killed 10 people, they would write a film about me. Yeah? And that's the reality of what they did to skinheads. So what happened is as they're promoting this, all your tough guys, all your hooligans who want a bit of notoriety, who want to be Jack the Lad, who want to be the ICF, or they want to be the Millwall, or they want to be whoever they are, they're looking at this media and go, yeah, I'm going to have a bit of that. We're going to get in the paper next week. And so they become National Front. So it was all, it all one set on another, set on another, set on another. And then, of course, all them TV shows that I just told you about, the acting world, I played that role loads of times, right? I didn't give a fuck. I was getting paid money for it. But actually, I was a big part of that because I was playing that stereotype role. I was playing the racist and the violent and the this and the that, So all the kids up in Durham or, Wiltshire or wherever they lived, they were seeing this stuff and going, oh, that's what skinhead's meant to be. But it was written by film producers and people who had their own agenda, and they wanted to make the cowboys and Indians, and we were the Indians, or the Italian gangsters or whatever, and that's all we were. And so it's all been distorted. And then as time's gone by, so these kids, and a lot of skinheads at the time, especially in London, and were runaways, and they were very mixed up with abusive childhoods and all that type of stuff. Then it was horrendous in London. I mean, kids would run away and come down to London. They'd be sold into the sex trade. They'd be hooked up on drugs, and this is male and female. So all those early skinheads you see that they then turned into the Antichrist with their tattoos on their faces and that, these are fucked up children. These are 15-year-old kids. But then it was this thug, well, why is he a thug? Why has he got a swastika tattooed on his head? It's because he's got full of hate and anger, so this is what it all was. It's a deep psychological thing. So I do take it quite personally. And I think as the time's gone by, you've then got the big Hollywood films like American History X and Romper Stomper and things like that were made. And then all that did is it just multiplied it. So all these kids in Alabama, whose dad was in the KKK, are going, oh, I'm going to be a skinhead because that's how the KKK dress. Then all of a sudden, skinheads from my estate who grew up with black kids are KKK members. Do you know what I mean? It's bullshit. And they're still doing it today. I mean, an example of it, I run the Skinhead Reunion in Brighton, and a few years ago, I was taking some pictures of the girls, a load of skinhead girls all in a row, and somebody came up behind me and took a picture over my shoulder of the girls. They then went and put it on a photographic library. Next thing you know, there's this big article in New York about the Proud Boys. Do you remember when the Proud Boys, I think it was before they overtook the White House and that, but they were like a sort of right-wing militia type group. But they also, they also wearing black Fred Perrys.
That's right. I remember now.
So they got these pictures of the Proud Boys. In the middle of this article, all about the Proud Boys, is a picture they're taking at the Skinhead Reunion of the girls, because one of them's got a black Fred Perry on, and going, so as if to say, these are Proud Boys. And these are girls who knew nothing at all about it. They're in Brighton at an event, having fun. Lovely girls, nothing racist whatsoever about it, but that is put in the media as then it links it. So all of a sudden, the Skinhead Reunion becomes a supporter of the Proud Boys. It's bollocks. It's absolute bullshit. And this is a constant that has never stopped. And the skinhead culture, I mean, it's what killed it in the end, because it just took, like, all the bands, after there was a riot in 81 and oi music had been coming out, and it got put on the shoulders of the skinheads. There was this riot in Southall, and so Margaret Thatcher banned oi music, banned skinheads, because there was a riot gig. But the actual fact was, it was young teenage kids who'd gone to see a band, and the Asians, there'd been a lot of confrontation within that time and within the last few years off that, with the National Front putting a lot of pressure and antagonising in the area. These kids had gone there. The Asians attacked the pub, burned the pub down. These are teenagers, but the teenagers, it was their fault. So therefore, all skinheads, everywhere in the ban them, get them out. All the bands that, like Cockney Rejects, who were from sort of down near you, they actually had a record in the charts. They were on top of the pops, and all of a sudden, that was it. They can't play. All the two-tone bands ended up folding up. They were folded up by sort of 82. And they, they were the first movement of music that, I mean, it sounds bizarre now, but then this was the first wave of music where black and white musicians were played together on a stage. So up until that point, black musicians played to a white audience, or black to a black audience. It wasn't white and black played, wherever. And now it's just totally normal. But then that was revolutionary. So these things, there's always a yin and a yang. There's always two sides to this. And the thing is, the media rule. The media will tell you, they will keep banging it into you until you believe it. I said, it's a little off subject, but I've just been to Vietnam. And I stayed on an island called Con Dao, which is a prison island. And I'd never heard of it. I just went there because it was a white sandy beach. And I learned when I was there that the French had taken all these Vietnamese people, put them in this prison, political prisoners. Some of them they'd held for 15 or 20 years, always tortured them to death. And then when the Vietnam War broke out, they then became the Viet Cong. The Americans then put them back in the same jail and tortured them, And all that time of us growing up, we were told that the communists is evil and that the Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, are going to mass murder. These are Buddhist farmers, rice farmers, and all they were doing was that they'd just been, 200 or 300 years of French colonial evilness, then mass murdered by the Japanese. Then the French decide to come back and start killing them again. So they said, no, fuck you. We don't want colonial power anymore. So they stood up against them. The communists backed them. So all of a sudden, America's got an excuse to go killing them. And 3 million of them were murdered, but we were told that they were the baddies. And when you go there and you see it for real, you realise how brainwashed we are and how, I would have joined the army when I was 16 to fight communists because I fully believed it, as we all did. It was a Berlin Wall. My brother was in the army, so the stuff you're told, especially when you're young and uneducated, and you've got to think in those days there was no internet, there was barely any travel, people didn't really learn anything more than what was at the end of their street. So we just believed what the Sun told us and what the BBC told us. And this is where skinhead history has been a victim of that, because it's sort of one creates the other, And the thing is, I remember clear as day in London, journalists coming up to us and offering us £5 to do a Sieg Heil. Seriously, they did. And you got to think we're earning £5 a day, on a building site or wherever it was. Yeah, when my first job as a YTS was £25 a week. So that was a day's wage to stand and do a Sieg Heil. So all those kids with tattoos on their faces, they're getting £5 a day just for doing that. Of course, that's then in the front page, Nazis in Soho, It's bullshit. The whole thing was bullshit, completely. Yeah.
Was it about ska and reggae that attracts skinheads to that music and not pop and rock and stuff? What is it about the ska and the reggae, you think?
Well, again, it goes back to that early history. If you go to the mods and the skinheads, the mods were the first sort of big, after the Teddy Boys, the mods were the big British subculture that was really based on British. Like Teddy Boys was, Edwardian clothing. It was American rock and roll. Now, my mum was one of the very first mods in the 50s. So the underground music then was jazz and R&B. So the mod name comes from modern jazz. They became the mods. So you got to think, this is conservative Britain when black music was really not on. They would play like nice conservative music, and
Yeah.
black music was edgy and it was underground and all that, and it was brought in by the American GIs. So though that early mod music, which was jazz and R&B, was the first sort of underground music in Soho at the time. Now that after 1960, in 64, there was, the beach riots around on the Bank Holiday Mondays, and all the mods and rockers kicked off. And again, it's the same sort of story as I just told you. All the tough kids around the country wanted to become a mod because that was like, wow, that's brilliant. We're going to be the rough kids. So all the sort of clever mods, the peacock mods, all moved away. Because this is, these are yobs. My mum sort of really have nothing to do with it because she didn't like Teddy Boys because they were yobs, as she called them, But the young kids who want to be tough guys want to become mods, but they don't want to be peacocks. So the next generation of youth culture was skinheads that came from the mods. So the next wave of music they picked up was the second wave of black music. So the American R&B and jazz was the mod. The second wave of black music was ska, because it was the same time the Caribbeans, mainly Jamaicans, were coming into England with ska music. And again, like I told you, they were living in the council estates and mixing. So this was the underground. The radio wasn't playing it. So this was the cool stuff. And then obviously very quickly they realised there's money in it. So people like Island Records and Trojan and people picked up on it and started marketing and selling it and making a lot of money out of it. And so this became the first original skinhead music. So throughout the history of skinheads, although the punk made a massive input into skinhead music, what you get now is you get these two almost factions. You get the ska lot say, we like ska, and the oi lot say, no, we like oi, we don't like that. Yeah. So there's these two sort of things. But me personally, I've always liked the whole thing. I've always liked music that's about stuff. And ska, early on, I didn't really know sort of what ska was. I was listening to it without knowing, because like I say, on my area, it was a lot West Indian. So we were listening to, in my first pub when I was 17, there was the DJs in the pub were Rastas. So they'd be playing all this sort of like dancehall music and reggae and ska and everything. And I didn't even really know what it was. And then obviously with Two Tone, they played things like Liquidator and Double Barrel and some of these songs.
Great stuff.
Yeah. So we knew that music. And then going to discos, the DJs who were obviously a bit older, they remembered the earlier sort of skinhead music. So they'd be playing ska and reggae. So we would listen to it and I never really thought of it as skinhead music. It was just music that was around, Desmond Decker and people like that. I sort of grew up with it. And then when Two Tone came along, it was like a gateway. We learned now, they go, ska. So of course you then start looking into what's ska, where's that come from? And then you start retracing the history and you go right back to Prince Buster and Laurel Aitken and all those massive, amazing reggae ska artists. And there's just a massive, massive library of this stuff. So when the sort of punk came along, and that's when I first really I know I'm talking a lot about skinheads here, but it's relevant. But punk was our music. My rebellious music was punk, because I like the lyrics of the Angelic Upstarts and the Sex Pistols and people, and I like that aggression and that smash the system and all that. So that was sort of my tough guy hooligan side. But the music I listened to at home and liked was reggae and ska. So I had those two things. I like a bit of oi and that, boost yourself up, give yourself a bit of energy. But ska music is what I generally listen to, and then Two Tone was just amazing. It was just us, So yeah, so it stayed throughout the skinhead history,
That's fantastic. So you've been running the Great Skinhead Reunion. Can you just tell people what it's about and what they can expect if they go?
Well, the Skinhead Reunion, I started in 2011. Now, I'd been, by that time, as we mentioned, I was an actor and a model and all that sort of stuff. And then I started working for a company called the Mean Fiddler. And I became a backstage manager for Glastonbury and Leeds and all that sort of stuff. And I remember sort of looking at all these American punk bands on stage, things like Sum 41 and Blink 182 and all those type of bands, Rancid and this sort of stuff, playing on these big stages with these massive crowds of British teenagers. And there was no punks on this, no English punks. I go, where's the English punk? Where is it? So when I broke up with that company, they sold out and we all got laid off. And I was just like a bit pissed off because I worked so much and built it up so much, and then they just dumped me like a fucking dirty rag, I decided to do a punk festival. And I didn't know at that point, this was the early days of the internet in about 2007. I really didn't know that there was all this internet trolls and extremists and bullshit. So they basically destroyed the event. Through these extreme left-wingers calling me a Nazi because I'd booked some skinhead bands. As far as I was concerned, I'd not been a skinhead for years, and here were some lads playing skinhead music and loved it. Oh, yeah, you can play. Oh, you can play. And I didn't know their history or anything about what was going on. All of a sudden, I became the Nazi event organizer. Even though I had bloody Neville Staple on the bill and loads of the sort of quite left-wing punk bands like GBH and Discharge and all those type of bands were playing. I'm a Nazi because this one band was playing who some bloke had fallen out with, and it's all bullshit. But it gave me a nervous breakdown, and it lost me a fortune. Yeah, I lost 20 grand of my own money. I had a complete nervous breakdown over it because I had so much money that I owed. I had to find 90,000 quid to pay for this event. I made 70 in sales, and I lost 20 of my own money, and I lost everything. So from there, Polly Styrene is I don't know if you know X-Ray Specs, but the singer,
fantastic.
well, Polly came to the event as a guest of one of the bands. So I met Polly, and she said, "Oh, how are you?" And I was like, "Don't talk to me about it. I was just destroyed, And she said to me, "Look, when the event's finished, come and see me on Monday, and I'll help you." So I went and see her. She had no money, but she was very, very spiritual and very open, and she basically helped me and counseled me, and me and her became very, very close friends. Then she said to me, "I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll do a gig for you. We're doing an X-Ray Spec show." So I thought, wow, these are one of the only bands in the world that I would pay to go and see, because I was a massive X-Ray Specs fan. I loved them, and to become a close friend, and then for her to say that, I then produced this event up at Camden Roundhouse, and we sold it out. We did the only X-Ray Specs gig in 20 years, and it turned out to be the last gig they ever did. But I then spent perhaps 3 or 4 years working with her, but because she had severe bipolar, it was really difficult to get anything going, because she'd be 1 minute she yes, next minute no, up, down, up, down, up, down. So I wasted these years focusing on trying to do, because we had like a world tour organised and all sorts, but she just wouldn't do it. And then she went and joined some record label who then wanted to cut me out the picture and all the rest of it. And so I was very didn't really know where to go and what to do. And I went off to South America. And I'm sorry going on, it's quite a big story, but the day before I went to South America, I'd gone back to High Wycombe where I grew up, and my kids at that time had a band. They were young kids, and there was a pub, in fact, the same one the Nag said that all the early punk bands used to play at. My kids had a gig there. So I'm dropping them off round the back of the venue, and there's a girl screaming in the street. So I jumped out, and behind her was a house on fire. So I ran into this house, and I pulled these people out. It was all just like smoke everywhere. I didn't really think, it sounds heroic, but I didn't really think about it. But I just ran in there, pulled them all out. And as I'm doing this, somebody came up behind me and said, "Oh, I recognise that voice." And it was one of my old skinhead mates. And I hadn't seen him for like 10 years. And he said to me, "Oh, it's a halfway house, they're all junkies." And I, "Oh, shit, yeah, that makes sense." And what they'd done, I think they'd left the cooker on or something. There was just smoke everywhere and, whatever. But in the process, Craig, my mate, he was all like emotions. And I've got to be honest with you, I've been on heroin for 10 years. And I went, for fuck's sake, and he said, but I'm trying to kick it. And he's really apologetic. He said, "Oh, you're like my big brother. And it's so nice to see you. And I always loved Craig. He was like a little brother. And he was them sort of guy, you always get one that, "Craig, take your trousers down and jump off the pier." "Yeah, right, I'll go and do that." He was one of them, always like naive and so easily led, But what happened, he joined the army. And when he was in the army, his friend had been shot and killed, and he died in his arms. So he'd given him a complete mental breakdown because of the trauma of losing seeing your friend shot and dead. It's not nice, So he left the army, and instead of going into counselling, he ended up on drugs. So for that 10 years where I hadn't seen him, he was a heroin addict. And I'd heard these horrible stories of many of my friends dying of drugs, the post-rave era, because we all went raving for a while and got into ease and everything. But then the harder drugs came in. That was goodbye for me. I was gone and back into my life. But some of those who had nowhere else to go stayed with the drugs and ended up dying. So I would just kept hearing these horror stories of all my friends. But anyway, I said to him, "I'll help you." But the next day I was going to South America. I said, look, when I get back, come down to Brighton. My brother at the time was counselling soldiers because he was an ex-soldier. He was counselling soldiers coming back from the Gulf. And Craig knew him anyway. So I said, oh, you come and see my brother. Oh, yeah. And he was really excited and everything. Anyway, a week later, I get an email from England saying that Craig had died. And, and I felt so bad. There I was in South America with my beautiful girlfriend at the time, sitting in a corner cafe, watching the beautiful world in Buenos Aires, like living a life of sort of, absolute, film star sort of stuff. I wasn't rich, but I just had this amazing life I was doing that day. And my mate had died in a heroin-infested bed. So I said, that's it. I'm not going to any more funerals. I'm going to get a skinhead reunion together. Because there must be people like me all over the country, people like Craig all over the country. We've all broken up. And it goes back to those days of, talking about the whole racial and media and all that. It broke us. And when rave came out, everyone just moved into that and the skinheads were left behind. But a lot of those skinheads were fucked up. They were kids from no parents, broken homes, child abuse, all that sort of stuff. And I was always the sort of leader of the gang type of character, And so I felt this obligation and this guilt and emotion and everything. And I wanted to make something positive out of Craig's death. And he was one of about 5 mates that died. So I started the Skinhead Reunion. The original idea was just basically a free party on a Saturday afternoon at a club on Brighton Beach. But about 150 skinheads came down, or ex-skinheads from all over the place. People came from Northern Ireland, all over the place for it. People said, oh, can I DJ? Can I play in a band? Blah, blah, blah. So I put it on. The following year, Roy Ellis, who wrote Skinhead Moonstorm, Jamaican guy, was living in Switzerland, and he got in touch with me and said, in fact, it was a guy called Tony from Tilbury who put me on to Roy Ellis. And so we decided to book Roy Ellis, but we had to buy the flight and give him a fee and a hotel. So I said to everyone, look, let's all put a tenner in each, and that will cover getting him over. And we got a really good, artist to play for us. So that really became the start of the Skinhead Reunion on that second year. And then after that, it was just more and more bands wanting to play and more DJs. And then the whole thing became from a one afternoon to a 4-day event, and now it's worldwide. It's not massive. It's very, it's very niche because, as you said, a lot of people are still scared of the word skinhead. So they feel like, oh, I can't do that because it's full of this and that. Actually, it's really, really friendly. What you got to think, it's like blokes who've been in the army and been to a war. They're not going to be walking around being tough guys, are they? They're like, well, they've done all that. And that's what the Skinhead Reunion's like. It's like an old rugby club gathering, everyone really looks after each other. And so many times people have said to me over the years, do you know, this is the safest place I've ever been to, girls, young lads and all. They say, I can't believe how everyone looks after us and, and that's what we've created, so it's a very positive thing. But that was the reason for it.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful you've done that, but it's a shame it come from tragedy. It's one of those things.
Well, it did, but it's what we were. We were a street family, in the 80s when we were teenagers. We were the rough kids. We were the ugly fat gingers. We were the ones that no one wanted to see. We were the odd ones out, and that's what bonded us. So that bond just stays. And as an adult, I still feel that same bond, that same sort of mentality,
And you've got some festivals coming up this year. What are the dates for those?
Yeah, well, we got the Great Skinhead Reunion. It's on its got 14th year now, which is terrifyingly scary. And that is, we have a barbecue on the 6th, which is like a free afternoon, just get together, have a meet and greet, a few beers and a barbecue. Then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which is the 7th, 8th, and 9th of June, is the Skinhead Reunion. We've got about 15 bands coming from all over the world, ska, reggae, punk, all sorts of stuff, Japanese bands, band from France, Jamaican, the original, one of the top oi bands called The Last Resort, Simmerit, all sorts of stuff, Menace, big punk band, all sorts of stuff. So that's that weekend. And then I've just sort of done a deal with a venue right on Brighton Beach to do an event over the mod weekend, which has been going for quite a while. But there's this venue that sits on the beach I never even knew existed. I think it's just sort of reopened. And they've asked me to put a mod festival together over that weekend because all the mods come. And so it's sort of like it be a little bit of a replication of the Skinhead Reunion, but for mods. And the Skinhead mod overlap anyway, because like I said, the Skinheads come from the mods and it's Brighton, it's all part of our sort of history. So I'm doing that. I'm also going to be doing a reggae festival well, what it's going to start off as a one-dayer on the 17th of August, I think it is, on Brighton Beach. I'm going to start that as a sort of one day. I'll see how it goes. I've got a lot of Jamaican friends from Brixton. They're going to come down and do an old school, proper, lovers rock, sort of that sort of era of reggae. So that's that. And then I'm also going to be doing once a month Ukrainian events, because I sponsored a girl from Ukraine who's like a soul singer, and I want to sort of get her moving, and then invite all the Ukrainians to come down and play and be part of it, and the British hosts. And so that's another little project I've got going. So yeah, I've just got to get it now. Dan's got an email a minute ago saying like, "Oh, can we just talk about the money and finance again?" It's like, "Oh shit, I thought we'd agreed with that." So I've already got running on it, and now got to start again. So, but hopefully that's all going to be keep going, because I'm not going to get ripped off again. So too many times I've put all my passion and energy in and stuff, and it's just either the rug's been pulled out and I get ripped off. So copycat.
You've got a fantastic website as well. Is it subcults.com? Did I get that right?
Yeah, with a Z.
With a Z. And you've got some fantastic clothing on there. And is that where people get the details about the festivals if they wanted to find out?
Yeah, if you go there so it's subcultz.com, and on there is all the information about the Skinhead Reunion. And there's you go to the shop, there's all bits and bobs, Skinhead clothing mostly, and a few records and CDs and stuff. It's just a sort of, it's a hobby sort of thing, but the reunion, that's where you go for the tickets. So it's all part of the whole subculture. Yeah,
that's great. And I'll put a link in the description. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting today. Thanks so much for your time. It's been great.
Yeah, all right, nice one. Anytime.